Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 most iconic and brutal tactical formations in military history.
Legions of Rome! To glory!
Number 10. Roman Testudo. The Roman Testudo, or tortoise formation, was a defensive tactic used primarily by the Roman legions at the height of the empire. It makes our list largely because it's arguably the single most famous military formation of all time, even if it is more about defense than attack. The soldiers would align their shields to form a nearly impenetrable shell around their unit, which then protected them against incoming arrows and projectiles. More than that, though, the Testudo allowed troops to advance with minimal casualties, even while under heavy fire. It's a move which showcased Rome's emphasis on discipline and coordination. Number 9. Circle of Canterbury. Although it was Rome that eventually bested the ancient Cantabrians of northern Spain, theirs was an army that did not go down without a fight. The Circle of Canterbury was key to their success, seeing as it allowed for a continuous bombardment of shots fired, even when early weapons were limited. The technique involved mounted warriors forming a circle or elliptical formation, and then continuously riding in a loop while throwing javelins and firing arrows at the enemy. The continuous movement dramatically upped the speed of the battle and created untold confusion. The Cantabrians could then capitalize to overrun their target with minimal losses.
Their spear, called a pilum, could kill from a distance. It can be thrown with lethal accuracy, around 100 feet.
Number 8. Hollow Square. It's a testament to the Hollow Square's effectiveness that it's been consistently used throughout history by countless armies. Generally, it required soldiers to form into a square, with all their resources facing outwards. From here, they staunchly defended while also launching attacks. The center of the square was kept empty to either store supplies or provide a base from which military leaders could issue their commands. With the advent of gunpowder, muskets were incorporated into the tactic, with pikemen still fronting the unit to provide protection. Perhaps the most effective application of the hollow square came via the Spanish tercios during the 16th century. Their squares were huge and all-encompassing, becoming a feared trademark of the time. Number 7. Flying Wedge. While control and defense are obviously crucial in war, there's always room for a little chaos. The flying wedge is one of history's oldest recorded formations, used as far back as ancient Greece. But really, it was made famous by medieval knights. There isn't a great deal of subtlety here, as incoming troops formed into an arrowhead shape designed to penetrate enemy lines with optimum force.
They start back out, and they form a V. I've heard of this before, but I've never seen it. It's the Flying V.
The lead soldiers bore the initial attacks, an inescapable condition of almost all formations ever, but those behind pushed forward relentlessly. When done well, the wedge would effectively refill again and again and again. The setup means that you can concentrate force at a single point before trailing units exploit the breach and widen the gap. Number 6. Phalanx.
Remember this day, man, for it will be yours for all time.
An icon of warfare during the time of ancient Greece, the phalanx formation is another that's been used, tweaked, and perfected over time. In many ways, it's similar to the Roman Testudo, only there's a greater immediate focus on attack. A wall of shields gave way only to an array of spears as the phalanx marched across the battlefield something like a tortoise again, but this time with spikes. Often, multiple units were arranged like this and then deployed collectively as a flying wedge. The legendary king of Macedon, Alexander the Great, used it to particularly good effect.
Zeus be with us!
Number 5. Horns of the Buffalo.
First, the head moves forward, and the enemy naturally moves in to meet it. But it's only a feint.
This was a strategy as much built for surprise as for power. It was used by the Zulu warriors under the leadership of Shaka Zulu in the early 19th century. The formation itself had three key parts. The horns were two flanking wings, filled with soldiers that had to move quickly to A, surround the enemy, and B, create confusion. The chest was where most of the fighting took place, by soldiers tasked with holding the enemy's attention. The loins was the reserve force, positioned behind the chest and ready to reinforce any part of the formation as needed. It's a setup that borrows elements from others in history, but it combines it all into a devastatingly fast and efficient routine. Number 4. Hannibal's double envelopment.
But they were blind to the growing danger all around them. Now it became clear why Hannibal had adopted the crescent formation.
Hannibal has quite the reputation, even today. A Carthaginian general during the Punic Wars, he fought against Rome as a masterful and brutal leader. His double envelopment attack at Cannae, though, is often hailed as one of history's greatest ever tactical masterpieces. During the battle in 216 BCE, Hannibal's army lured Roman forces into advancing too far forward. Then he encircled the Romans from all sides, using his cavalry to close off every escape route.
The trap was sprung. The vast army of Varro and Paulus was completely encircled.
It was as though the Roman army were a fish and Hannibal had trapped it in a net. The move meant that he could swiftly annihilate a much larger force in what would ultimately be remembered as one of the bloodiest days of warfare ever seen.
You'll return with your cavalry and cut them off. There will be no mercy.
Number 3. Grande Batterie. A favorite strategy of Napoleon Bonaparte, the Grande Batterie involved amassing a concentration of artillery, including cannons, to deliver intense firepower over a sustained period of time at a focused target. It was perhaps more high risk than some other moves on this list, because often it was only possible if Bonaparte were willing to weaken his armies at other locations. But for the most part, the Grande Batterie was successful. Around 130 years after the Napoleonic Wars ended, some comparisons could arguably be drawn with Nazi Germany's Blitzkrieg tactics. These again required a huge and overwhelming concentration of resources, including by the time of World War II, from the air as well as on land.
The infantry, artillery, and combat engineers of Army Group A begin to punch through weak Allied forces, screening the Ardennes.
Number 2. Manipular lines.
In Spain and France, there was little fighting. Caesar easily outmaneuvered his opponents, and many of them switched and joined his side.
Otherwise known as the Hastati Principe Triari formation. This was arguably the key feature to the Roman army. It consisted of 3 distinct lines of soldiers, which when combined formed a flexible, resilient, and formidable fighting force. The Hastati was the first line, composed of younger, quicker, less experienced, and lightly armored personnel, whose role was to engage the enemy. Next, the Principes was the second line, with more experienced and better equipped fighters to back the Hastati up. Finally, the Triari, who were veterans of war with significant combat experience, came third. They were heavily armored and served as the last line of defense. In some ways, the setup was just as brutal for those within it, especially in the Hastati, as it was for those against it. But there's no doubt that it's a fighting pattern we've seen repeated in the centuries since, all the way up to modern warfare. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. Mongol Swarm.
The Mongol army descended like a storm.
As we've seen, the best strategies tend to hit multiple important requirements: strong attack, disciplined defense, sustained pressure, and unpredictability. In general, swarming tactics have been used throughout war history because they can deliver for many of those needs. But perhaps none have implemented them better than the Mongol armies, especially under Genghis Khan. His forces worked via decentralized command, which made them flexible. And all of them were extremely mobile, which meant that units could quickly and easily combine. To enemies, an approaching swarm of Mongol soldiers looked like a fast-moving and untrackable wave. But all along, there was formation there, with every component part knowing exactly what it should do. On top of that, the Mongols became notorious for feigned retreats, another unconventional and destabilizing tactic that their swarm formations could allow for. And that's why, for a time, they were unbeatable. Which military formation do you think is the most effective? Which is the hardest to fight against? Let us know in the comments.
Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.